Thank you for the introduction. I won't claim to be an expert on the subject, so just in case I get a difficult question, I brought the experts along with me. What I am is an advocate for open data, and I do believe it will bring great benefits to Greater Manchester, and I'm certainly supporting that and making sure that happens. If information is the currency of democracy, we decided to generate some new capital, and I think that's something that all of us in the European Union at the moment can understand. We'd like some additional capital, but we'd also like it at a better exchange rate. So hopefully through open data, we can try to create some new capital. DataGM was funded by the Manchester Innovation Fund, and it was led by Trafford Council, as Julian said, with Futures Everything as the project advocates and really key drivers behind the project. It contains spend data across all of the local authorities and our partners, and AGMA is more than just 10 local authorities. It's Transport for Greater Manchester, it's police, it's fire, and it's much more. We've started to collate data at the moment, which includes things like school exclusions, bus timetables, voting turnout, locations of disabled parking bays, tree species. It's really, believe it or not, really interesting. It was developed by a consortium approach and unique, and Julian touched on collaboration, and I think this is unique because it was developed through a collaborative steering group. Nobody took particular, well, Trafford took a lead, but nobody was responsible as an individual, so it was driven totally by a steering group, and they didn't fall out much, and delivered a project on time and on budget. And I think what's really important for this piece of work, and it's only the beginning rather than the end of a piece of work, is the cost. And we managed to deliver this innovative project for under £10,000, which is pretty impressive in the greater scheme of what's been spent on various IT and data projects. You think of them usually in much, much higher figures. It took only 3 months from beginning to end, to launch, I should say, and that's really only the beginning. And I like to think that we try to reduce bureaucracy where possible. So it was definitely what I'd call light on, sorry, I've forgotten to move on my slides. It was light on process and very decisive in delivery. And one of the really important things for me in this was the amount of support that came from various bodies, people like Commission for the New Economy, MDDA, who played a key role in developing this as well and will be key partners in making sure it's sustainable. North West E-Government Group, Open Knowledge Foundation, the Comprehensive Knowledge Archive Network as well, and also the people who are not really connected with any of those organisations but are what I would call keen, devoted, open data, not specialists but certainly advocates, who have managed to support in various ways with time and resource as well. There is efficiencies obviously in data. We've talked about this earlier today as well, and for me I'm about finding efficiencies and finding better ways of doing things and cheaper ways of doing things. And I think through data we can find opportunities, certainly as local authorities, and it's not, you know, it's not what we call the sexy side of data, but actually we need data every day to function as local authorities and all the public sector. And if we can use data and manipulate it and allow the public to manipulate that data for us, it can actually drive our services, it can drive direction of services, it can give us intelligence to tell us how we should be driving our services. And we talk a lot about customers, but actually we don't ask our customers very often what would they like. And open data is a way of customers telling us without having to ask, because they can use the data, they can actually turn it into real intelligence that they can give back to us. So it's a closed loop process, and I think it's, as I said, it's the beginning for Greater Manchester. They're starting to get their heads around actually it's safe to put data into open data format, and what can come back is very, very valuable in terms of driving direction of travel for services and, most importantly, connecting with customers. An example that we had around efficiency, Manchester Marketing said that it took 3 of their staff 4 days to get data together on street furniture for an event. once the site is fully populated, it would literally take a few minutes to gather the same information. Now that's an example of potential savings, reduction in resource that we could make in the public sector around using data smarter and more efficiently. But as I said earlier, for me the key thing is how do we use the data, turn it into intelligence and help it to drive services. We talk about transparency, and I've managed to get this point in the presentation without actually mentioning transparency. We actually started out looking at this as a proposition to help us with the transparency agenda. And as you know, government is very, very clear that they want everything transparent, everything public, and I have to agree with them, so much so that we published everything that we spend over £500 well in advance of the direction from government to do so. I'm quite pleased that we were able to do that. And it was through that process that we actually got involved in the open data agenda. We felt that more information should be made open to the public without being told so by government. And the outcome for us, one of the really positive things for me recently is when we now receive a dictate from government that you must open certain data, we've either already done it or we can do it within days. Most authorities that are not on the same agenda or at the same point in the process are taking months to open the same data. So for us it's been a real advantage. We currently have about 2,000 data sets covering various local authority functions and outcomes. And 90% of those are not in open formats, so we need to make sure that all of the data we contain is made open and all future data is in a format that can be opened and put onto an open data platform. Decentralisation and local government localism bill. This is something that's occupying our mind quite a bit at the moment, and it's a little bit like big society. We're not quite sure what it is yet. And we need to wait and see how it evolves. And like most of the, I suppose the ideas, I call them ideas because they're still taking shape, that have come from government, the localism bill is starting to form and take shape, and it will impact hugely on how we deliver services. And localism is about local people taking local control and local democracy. And I think there's no other way greater that could prove the ability of us as local authorities and public sector handing over that ability to the local community to take control, but other than giving them all of our data in an open format. And that's saying this data belongs to you, which it does, and we're happy for you to access that in an open way and to manipulate that in how you see fit. And to me that really feeds into the localism bill and every key principle within it. But it does come down to trust again, and I'll keep coming back to that. But we should, obviously the localism bill is all about focusing on outcomes and not process, and it's back to get rid of the bureaucracy, let people take control of their own lives, let them take control of their own information, even to the point that government have said we shouldn't produce our monthly publications that come out of local authorities, and they are simple little leaflets that go out to the public telling them what we're doing. So they've said, no, don't do that anymore because you're actually telling people what you want them to hear. We'd rather you didn't do that and you give them all your data and they can decide whether they like it or not. And I think that's a much cleverer way of getting the public engaged and actually making them become much more engaged in local democracy. Despite a clear remit, the process, it's not without challenges, and I think no process, even though it only took 3 months to get to where we are, is not without its challenges. And I've mentioned trust a few times, and I think there's a culture around data, and I think it stems from the number of different acts over the last few years that have got certainly the public sector in a twist, freedom of information and data protection and all of those things, and they're terrified they're going to be sued if we give somebody the wrong information in the wrong format or they use it in the wrong way. And a whole industry built up around this over the last 5 years, 6 years, not least because people left very sensitive data on trains and buses and things, which didn't help. And I think we have to do some myth busting around open data and what it isn't. And we haven't quite got there yet. Even in Greater Manchester, there's still some elements of the public sector thinking, oh, if we put our data out, it could be used for means that could be damaging. And really, it's an education process we need to go through. We need to educate people to understand it's a safe environment, it's a safe way to do business, and actually it's really positive if they release their data, it's not a negative. But we're getting there, and it will take a little bit of culture change and probably a little bit of brainwashing as well. In terms of policy context, I've mentioned various previous acts, things like freedom of information, etc., that have driven certain attitudes and cultures. Transport for Greater Manchester, I think, can be looked at as a real example of somebody who hasn't allowed those kind of things to stop them doing what they see as being really progressive. And they've come on board with this project. They've become very, very involved in the project, very big supporters, and released and are prepared to release all of their data. Now, I think that's fantastic, but there is a precedent set in the Transport for Greater London Transport Authority, is it? Who we had a presentation from a few months ago, and they've actually already done this. So they've proven it works. They've used open data in a really customer-friendly way. I think they were forced into it because somebody hacked into their system, but that was the catalyst, let's say. But they used that well and became advocates of that. And again, they're people that have seen the benefits financially as well of open data and making it available to the public. And we need to learn some lessons from them in Greater Manchester and see how we can make such benefits from open data. Some of the more, I think, controversial things that people don't like to see going on there, and that we've had to, again, maybe shift the culture slightly, because they're not quite used to this level of, not transparency, but scrutiny, is things like senior salary pay going onto the web. And that did take a little bit of convincing, and it's something that people are starting to get used to. And I've been trying to get this message across for many years in local government. We actually work for the public, so therefore we shouldn't have any secrets from the public because they own the business. So hopefully that will move people closer to that realisation. A little bit of technical stuff. We opted for clear, accessible format. Form follows function. The system is uncomplicated. If you look on the site, I recommend that you do if you haven't already. Maybe you have. If you look at it, we shine a light on the work that we do. We show what we count, what we cost, what we spend. It's all done in a very clear way that you can actually pick up the information and use it. We've had community developers take that information, turn it into really useful and exciting information. And we look at all sorts of what would normally look like not very exciting information. Once you join it up with other information, it becomes extremely useful and also drives, as I said earlier, can drive business. I won't go through again. We did avoid, through the planning process, we didn't try to do death by business case on this. We started small. We used data that's available. We're on the start of a journey rather than the end of a journey. We have quite a lot of data already on the site. We're still overcoming barriers around trust and usefulness. And I think over the next couple of months we'll be able to, I won't say do a sales pitch, but I think over the next few months we'll be able to convince people that actually the benefits are there and they should release not just the data they have available, but all future data and make it in an open format from the beginning so that we can start to build a sustainable site that will be a legacy for the future. And one of the things that really for me, the prize in all of this was not the open data site, it was what we can do with the open data site. And as a public sector representative, what I really want to do is develop a data observatory that will use the open data site as a foundation to provide really robust information that we can use to profile areas, to profile services. And the observatory itself wouldn't be open, but it would contain information that would actually influence us on a daily basis and tell us how we're performing and what our services are doing and how they impact the public. And to me, that's the ultimate prize. Our approach, custodian rather than controller. We tell people what we know, we give them our information, they become the custodian of that information, and to me that's real democracy in action. Commitment to DataGM, our wish is to develop creative approaches and not just to stop at DataGM. It's the beginning of a journey, how we use the tool, and it is a tool that we use for other purposes as well. We hope that we can use it to increase revenues, to create jobs, to build profiles within Greater Manchester that helps other people to create jobs. And what we do want to do is look at how the archive services for Greater Manchester develop using this tool, and not just this, but the Data Observatory tool. And we're hoping that our Trafford approach to the Data Observatory will become a Greater Manchester approach as well. So we're trying to lead the way on developing that, using the DataGM site as the foundation and platform to do that. We want more eyes, more perspectives and more help, fewer data shufflers and more data analysts, and help push data analysis further. I'm not sure everybody would agree with that. I think data people and techies would agree with that, but I'm not sure everybody would agree that we need more data analysts. What we do need is more rich data, more data giving us clearer direction and far more intelligence that we can use data that makes life easier for our residents and our citizens and actually cuts costs ultimately for how we do things. Finally, I'd like to finish on a tweet by Morgan Pearce, and he's a Canadian tweeter for those of you that don't know him, and I think he may be even at the festival. And he described DataGM as a shining example of a consortium initiative, and I think that's a really great accolade for the work that's been done by the Open Data and DataGM steering group. And I think as well, it's not just open data that's come out of this. It's a lot of collaborative working around data sharing, and I think that will open up other opportunities and has opened up other opportunities and avenues of collaboration across Greater Manchester. And I think the impact and the influence that Futures Everything has had as well on that will help us to maybe be a little bit more creative about data in the future. And it's always good because we're very inward looking at times in the public sector, and we don't spend a lot of time maybe reflecting and thinking about creative ways of doing things. And I think through this mechanism we can see that sometimes it's good to look outwards, it's good to involve academia in processes because it brings a fresh approach, it brings a whole new set of ideas into how you do normal day-to-day things, and actually makes you realise that there's a big world out there that you should be talking to them on a much more regular basis, and it might actually make your life a lot easier by bringing them into the fold and using their ideas to develop what you're trying to do, without, I suppose, more creative people being involved in the mix. And that's something that I got from this process, that actually there's real value in looking much more broadly across the spectrum of skills and people in solving day-to-day problems. And that's my presentation on DataGM. Are we taking questions or yes? Happy to take questions.
Okay, if I'll offer it up to the floor.
Hi, I work for Salford City Council. I'm really encouraged to see the work that you've been doing at Trafford, and I've been involved at Salford. But we don't have at Salford the same level of support and encouragement from leadership and senior management, and I'm wondering what, you did touch on it a little bit, but what you can or what you think you could do to help gain that support at that senior level that would help me in the work that I'm doing at a lower level to get that data online.
I can just see Victoria, she's smiling because she's been encouraging that we do this for some time now, and I've been trying to pick the right time because most things are about timing. And now that we have the elections over with and people are less distracted, I'm planning to arrange for a presentation on DataGM to the business management group, which is basically the deputy chief execs across Greater Manchester. And I have also been speaking to some other interest groups within Greater Manchester to see how we can bring it into some of the work streams around performance, research and intelligence. And for me, this should be an integral part of any research and intelligence group across Greater Manchester. And we have a group that's focused on that, so we need to make this part of that work stream.
Money for futures. My head's spinning. Well, more than my head's spinning. And that's not your fault. But the reason I'm saying this is because it's very difficult to form a question. But if I start off with where you ended up, which is about dialogue, there seems to me that there is a major problem. And the major problem is the problem that you've identified, that large organizations tend to be introverted. And the second level of the problem is that putting out data is fine, but it presupposes, as you said, that there are people out there who can analyze it. And people relate through stories. Only specialists relate through data. So it's not a criticism, it's just an observation of the process, and it feels like a very generative, swirling process. I don't know whether you've any comment on what I've said.
It'd be unlikely I wouldn't. I usually have a comment on everything. I think there's what we have to do is recognise different pockets of the population have different skills and abilities. And for many years, we've decided to tell people what we think they want to hear. And we've satisfied a lot of people with the stories, be they, accurate or whatever. And that's fine, we'll do that too. We'll try and interpret, we give people performance figures. Obviously, it would be much better if we're using some sort of robust foundation in terms of data to create those stories, and this can help to do that. We will still create the case studies, the performance figures, the outcomes, we'll still publish all of those. But as well as that, what we will allow is a pocket of the population who actually have been asking for this and will use this to make up their own mind. And you know what they say, there's, lies, damn lies and statistics. And what we tend to do is interpret things to make them tell us what we want to hear ourselves and what we think other people want to hear. And what open data gives us an opportunity to do is allow people to test our robustness on our own analysis, to do their own analysis and come up with a different answer and challenge us on that analysis. And we'll happily challenge them back on theirs. And it makes it, I think, a much more level playing pitch in terms of transparency and honesty.
If you could apply this process, so this way of working, to something else across Greater Manchester that wasn't to do with technology, what would you apply it to?
How long do you have? It's interesting because I work as a lead on collaborative improvement and efficiency across AGMA, and I also lead on the AGMA procurement hub. So I've had lots of war wounds and scars, and I've spent many years trying to make people collaborate. And we have a phrase called AGMA drag, and local authorities think if they decide to collaborate, it'll take forever because it'll just all get slowed down and we'll go at the pace of the slowest, and somebody can't make their mind up because it's all too hard, and there could be a few turkeys in there who won't vote for Christmas because it'll threaten what they want to do and they might lose a job. And I've managed to work with that culture for many years now. And the recent, I suppose, change in the financial landscape has helped to demolish a lot of those barriers that previously we would have had to pander and work through, and it was quite a difficult process at times. And now we have a real strong mandate to cut through the barriers and to cut through a lot of the difficulties that we have, because we have a clear, not a clear vision, but we have a clear remit in terms of government agenda, but also we have huge savings to make across AGMA, about 600 million in the next 3 years. And this project is different to many of the others in that whilst it was a steering group, there was no individual really driving it. Trafford led on it, but I can safely say it was driven by the steering group. Futures Everything was the influence, I suppose, behind that, which I think made a difference and added that added dimension to it. But it started, it finished, and it did what it said on the tin. And what would I apply that to? All of the other pieces of work that I'm trying to do, actually. It's just how you capture that willingness to start somewhere, finish somewhere, And the difference with this one is that the prize at the end of this was an open data site, not £1 million worth of savings, or, you know, and even we didn't know when we finished it how well it would work, how well it would be received, whether people would collaborate at the end of the process. So really it was a bit of a risk to take, but it's worked, and I think it's only started, so it should work really well by the time we finish with it. And a lot of the other projects have a lot more prizes to be gained, and yet there's a lot less willingness to engage. So I don't know whether it's the mindset of people who deal with data, who just want to get on with it. I don't know whether it was because it was the particular data project that it was, which is about openness and transparency, and actually you wouldn't be in there in the first place if you didn't believe in it. And I'd like to capture some of it in a bottle and take it to all of the other working groups.